Welcome. This is Astrology Insight Now, a weekly forecast program with astrology and other ways to help you make the most of your week and to heighten confidence for daily life. It's run by Pamela Cuccinell, that's me, the astrologer, and I invite you to find out more about my work at insightoasis.com. I look forward to your joining us every week. Please share with your friends, and here we go. We're going to begin on August 12th, and full disclosure, this is probably going to be another very active, with a lot going on week. We can take advantage of that, and I certainly am going to do my best to let you know how. We are in the waxing moon cycle, which heads towards that full moon on the 19th. And look for later in the week, midweek, when I will put out my first full moon meditation that hopefully going forward you will hear over the next several months. Full moons and new moons meditations that will be given out a few days ahead of the actual lunation so that you can prepare and use it at your leisure. So on this day, August 12th, and as I begin, let me preface, the times I give are for the Eastern time zone, so you're going to need to adjust if you don't live there, and that's kind of a habit of mine. I don't live in the Eastern time zone anymore, but I do have many, many clients, family, and friends there, and it also is a point of action for certainly the United States, at least at this point in time. The capital is Washington, D.C., and I'm not suggesting that's going to change. But between that and New York City, there is it's really, those two places are hot spots, nexus for the country. And so I do tend to look at that a lot in an electional capacity when I'm considering world events or how the United States stands in the world. So that is the reason why I focus on Eastern time zone. Even though I don't live there, I'm always adjusting, and you all have to as well if you don't live there. Beginning on Monday the 12th, the moon is in the sign of Scorpio, and it is building towards a real emphasis on creative dream energy. And this is really delicious for aiming towards something you want to make happen. Remember, we're at the time of the Leo sun, and the Leo sun is, among other things, it symbolizes the divine child, which we all have a piece of, that curiosity, that sense of wanting to look for, explore, unfold, bloom. And this time of year can be a time when we really tap into that energetically. With the moon in Scorpio, there's a natural tension there because Scorpio is a fixed sign like Leo. So it will enter the square, or the quarter moon rather, as we might say, and that happens on this day, on the 12th. I don't see squares as necessarily being bad. They're challenging. They bring up something that ideally is to awaken, confront, consider, and so on this day, many of us may have that energetically occurring. This is emphasized by the fact that that moon is making a geometric picture with Uranus, which is still in the sign of Taurus, another fixed sign, and that's Sun in Leo. So it's very dynamic energy as it moves towards its actual opposition. And that actually occurs in the wee hours of the next day, the 13th, but we are feeling it. So what does that mean exactly? Well, what it means is that we're teasing out, we're confronting things that perhaps don't necessarily feel comfortable, but as anyone who's ever been involved in a creative process, whether it be cooking a casserole, painting a room, or some sort of artistic endeavor, knows that we encounter places that are not comfortable. The way we thought we were going to execute something is not necessarily going as we intended. This is, again, exacerbated perhaps by the fact that Mercury is retrograde now, which highlights the importance as we go through this week of really looking at communications, editing, make sure we're saying what we mean. Listen. I always talk about listening when I'm talking about communication, because listening is really something that is important to deepen into, to truly understand all the levels of communication. And as we do that, as we sort of chafe against or feel places that aren't entirely comfortable perhaps on this day, we're also moving in to what could be a opening up or a seeing something in ways that we haven't considered. Enlightenment, if you will. And it is definitely heightened for those of us who meditate, who sink into that knowing. And so I invite you all to find time to do that. When the moon is in Scorpio, words that come to mind are research, plumb the depths, look very deeply into what's being said in a psychological, emotional context. If we feel ourselves reacting in ways that are particularly prickly or perhaps defensive or habitual ways of lashing out, or have conversations or confrontations with people who are doing that, we benefit from looking more dimensionally, from asking someone, oh, wow, that was a bit sharp. How are you really feeling? Can we talk about that more? Instead of putting up a wall or lancing back. Remember, the scorpion in its lowest manifestation wants to sting. And in its higher manifestations, it gets the long view, and it can burn off habits or systems that no longer serve. But we can only do that by admitting where we have faults, frailties, where we react in ways that basically are old and unhelpful to our evolutionary spiritual development. So I consider this actually a highly productive day. As you can hear, it's not necessarily easy, but the more aware of where you're at emotionally in any engagement or the people around you, the more productive it becomes. Tuesday the 13th, that moon is also in the sign of Scorpio, but just in the early hours. It can be very rich for the dreamscape, depending again where you are on the planet. And so we can open up to revelations and ideas. Those of us who jot down notes or remember dreams or wake up with a sense of what just happened in my subconscious awareness, whether we're able to really deep dive and dwell on it or just give a few minutes of reflection, it can be very helpful to help us reorient, see where we're at, and also realize how that dream world may have helped us slough off, rid, or move through something that might have been very difficult. The moon goes void, of course, at 5:01 a.m. Eastern Time. So early risers are definitely in this very meditative, revelatory space, which can be very helpful. People who journal when they first wake up, do their morning pages, meditate, very, very rich time. Then it's void for exactly an hour, and it enters Sagittarius at 6:01 a.m. And once it enters Sagittarius, very different energy than Scorpio. It's fire, it's mutable, it's fast moving, and it is especially on for oops, slips of the tongue, mistakes with our sends. It's really important over the next 36 hours or so that you really consider what you say or what you're delivering or anything contractual. It's best to, if you can, bank it for a while and look at it again. Really, really helpful. The overall day, the people who have conversations early morning, these are the times when we have particular tension between how we may react, respond with the mercurial delivery of our message. So if you're someone who is immediately online or responding to texts or things of that nature, there may be messages or things that come out that are particularly barbed, and we want to consider how we want to respond to that, even if it's not something you're actually engaged with. One of the things that I talk about, and I will say again, is we all have the the messages that are continually around us through the media, through people. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you're someone who does go online, who hears things. There are people who just totally close themselves off from regular engagement with them. Probably not a lot. In today's world, it's really difficult to work or make certain things happen without a great deal of engagement in a electronic capacity. But certainly the next period of days is going to be quite changeable with that. And this is why. Mars is moving through the sign of Gemini, and on Wednesday the 14th, it is exact conjunction 11:22 a.m. Just a short period later, on the 16th of August, that Mars is in square to Saturn, which is in the sign of Pisces. Basically, what we've got is we've got this square between Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. And the tension of that is even stronger when someone has planets in the sign of Sagittarius or Virgo, because those are also mutable signs, and that creates even more geometric tension. And I'm not going to talk about this a lot on this particular podcast, but as we look at the people who are running at this point in time for office, at least the two main candidates, Donald Trump is born with the full moon, and it was an eclipse between Gemini and Sagittarius, he also has the nodal axis, because it was an eclipse, of the North Node in Gemini and the South Node in Sagittarius. And I'll be writing and talking more about that at another point in time. Kamala Harris has the rising of Gemini with the North Node there, and in opposition, the descendant and the South Node. So these two players are getting very, very stimulated this week. And so you can get an idea, looking at the news cycle, if you choose, to see how both of these people are responding with this kind of tension, which is quite ramped up because of the square that's occurring between Jupiter, Mars, and the Saturn in Pisces. The interesting piece about this is also, as we move toward that full moon, we've got more planetary energy. So when you get to listen to the full moon meditation that I'll put out later in the week, that will be to prepare you to utilize as best possible the energy with this full moon, which can be highly productive. The thing to remember about tension aspects in astrology is that when we know we have them, either in our natal chart or through transit, we can really utilize that tension beautifully. I mean, we're just finishing up having watched and enjoyed the Olympics in Paris. And so what you've seen with these athletes who have been doing amazing feats is that they have been working very adroitly with tension. I'm not just talking astrologically, obviously. I'm talking about the way that we make things happen through tension and understanding how things work against and with each other. And athletes know this because they are continually working with space, their bodies, how they move, variables of weather, if they're out of doors, variables of auditoriums. And that's all tension. So hard aspects, the language of astrology, is not bad in itself. Where we get tripped up is if we succumb to the challenge in a way that makes us feel as that we cannot work with it, we cannot overcome it, and we cave to what seems to be stronger than our will, our ability to transcend. Midweek, we will all be encountering the invitation of how are we going to transcend. And on Wednesday the 14th, the emphasis is on, okay, I feel this surge of energy with Mars, Jupiter in conjunction in Gemini. So where's Gemini on your horoscope? As I said, for Donald Trump, it's this conjunction is approaching his Sun North Node, right in his 10th house. So we're all going to hear it, see it. With Kamala Harris, it's approaching her ascendant in her 12th house. So her expression of this energy may be more thoughtful, calculated, but also perhaps getting a hit from hidden enemies, because that's an aspect of a 12th house transit. So very interesting to be watching these people as we approach midweek, but most importantly, how are we utilizing it? And then as we get into the 15th of August, what's happening is the moon goes void, of course, on 12:52 p.m. And at that point in time, we have a nice envelope in that void, even though it's void. And of course, when I talk about the void moon, I say it's not a good time to start something. It's better to finish up projects. And all this is absolutely true. In Sagittarius, when the moon is void, there's a lightness of it. Look to where Sagittarius is in your horoscope. This is where you can really use the energy of that void to open up, explore, have fun. The moon enters the sign of Capricorn at 1:51 p.m. And once this occurs, oh my goodness, what a terrific time to buckle down and do the work at hand. Make it happen. Now remember that Mars square Saturn happens actually at 1:30 a.m. in the wee hours of August 16th. So we are feeling that on the 15th. We are actually feeling energetically that square I talked about with Mars and square to Saturn. And some of us, especially those who are sensitive to that particular aspect, have been feeling it for a week or so, because Mars Saturn it basically is asking us to hunker down, to do the task at hand. It's not a happy place for Mars to feel continual pressure for Saturn if we're born with that. But as we mature and work with it, if we are able to, because not everybody can, some people feel that sense of, oh, this hurts, this is hard, this is difficult to accomplish. And, someone is always crushing my ambition or what I want to do, or I'm acting up a lot and fighting against the authority. Not the most constructive way to use this. The most constructive way to use it is to say, oh, okay, I have this surge of ambition. I want to make something happen, but I have to practice. I have to discipline myself. I have to follow the rules. With the Jupiter conjunction to that Mars, we really want to go with what we want to go with. But Saturn is saying, have you followed through? Have you done what you need to do? So looking at this energetically, again, it'll be interesting just to eye how these two candidates are handling themselves midweek into Friday, because that will be a tell as to how do they work with Mars-Saturn pressure. Because consider it, when you're working with tremendous authority and aggression, because Mars is aggression, it's assertion, it's leadership, and Saturn is all those things as well. Not really aggression, but it's certainly leadership, authority. And it wants things to hold to a certain discipline, the way Saturn sees it. So how's that working? I bring this to it as an example for us to understand how these planets are working. And these planets, again, it's not like we're controlled by the planets, but they symbolize aspects of the psyche. How comfortable are we with taking responsibility, disciplining ourselves, holding to a routine, as opposed to asserting ourselves, acting with dynamic energy, following something we desire. And this tension this week can give us a lot of information on how we work with that, especially as we're going towards that full moon. So Friday, highly productive day, highly creative day. For those of us who feel like we are walking that balance beam. And I just laugh because I have never been an incredibly agile person, but I love using athletic prowess as an example of how we work or have the ability to work with the material realm to make something happen. So you can use use Simone Biles in your mind if you want to, as this is something I want to accomplish with grace. And see how that works for you. If it helps you as something to aim for, not that any of us will be able to achieve her accomplishments, but she's a wonderful icon for someone who has aimed, also dealt with certain things she's had to concede to in her own understanding of her psyche, what keeps her aiming. And these are things, imagery, that we can work with. So August 16th, highly creative day, wonderful day to connect with people who are going to be there for you, follow through, terrific for that. And the other thing that it really picks up on is a revisit to whatever we were doing on Monday that we were aiming for, dreaming, wanting to make happen. We can really wrap it up so well on Friday into Saturday. Yes, this is how it's coming together. I've been meeting the right people. We are having those conversations. And remember the Mercury retrograde. So it's often the revisiting, the working through, the deepening into, the meditation, the creative process. And the other thing to emphasize is when we revisit our errors or mistakes, the things that didn't work the first time, because this is Moon in Capricorn, the end of the week. It's telling us it's that steady movement upward in spite of, oops, that wasn't quite the right place to step, and I'm looking for more sure footing that gets us to achieve what it is we want to achieve. Saturday, the moon goes void, of course, 4:43 p.m., and then it enters Aquarius at 5:45 p.m. Once it enters in Aquarius, we are in that arc towards that full moon that happens on Monday. And so we are embracing how we are heading towards that full moon. And full moons are integration of the energy that's in front of us. So in the sign of Aquarius, we are working to bring in that sense of how we are seen in the wider community with what it is that individuates us, what is our unique spark, our shining light that we bring that's ours alone. And it doesn't mean all of us are on the stage or ascending to world renown, but it does mean that Each of us has a voice. Each of us has an impact. Each of us has a message, something that we are here to do. Sink into that. Smile into it. Have that sense on Saturday evening of what is it that makes you want to shine. Deep conversations, revelatory, can be a little uncomfortable for people who are feeling that sense of, oh gosh, change is coming, transition's coming, I don't really like it. The thing with the Pluto in Aquarius is anytime one of us is having a Pluto transit, we have to work with what's in front of us. Basically, we can't avoid it. We have to work with it. It's human nature, often for us not to want to do it, but we are in this time of transition, and sociologically, how systems work. And some of us may be confronting that very specifically. The best way to cope with it is to invite in the change. Say, okay, I am capable of riding this wave. You have to roll with it and keep your head above water. That's the ideal. It can be a lovely evening, lots of fun, networking, lively people, very stimulating. And the next day, Sunday, these are productive days if we're working towards that full moon integration and seeing how we shine. There's no hiding under the rock now, but people will, I know, but the ideal is to let yourself feel that sense of discomfort and trust who you really are. You have been listening to Astrology Insight Now. Please share with your friends, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so at astrologyinsightnow.com. Have a stellar week, and we hope to see you next time.